The Buffalo Bills season comes to an end after a loss in the divisional round to the Kansas City Chiefs. Another heartbreaking year for the Buffalo Bills, but we have to switch our attention over to the free agency period where the Bills will have 21 unrestricted free agents after this season, and they will also have a restricted free agent. We will dive into this and more on the Go Bills podcast right after we hit the intro. Welcome in, Bills Mafia. Welcome back to another edition of the Go Bills podcast presented by GoBillsPodcast.com. I'm your host and founder of the page, Brett McDurphy. Glad to be with you on this Wednesday evening to talk about Buffalo Bills football, and we have a great show for you today. As always, don't forget to like and subscribe and comment on the video. It helps us generate more people to watch the show, and we greatly appreciate it as well. Today, we're going to talk about our Resign and Let Walk series. It's going to begin today with our first Resign and or Let Walk of the series. It's going to be Leonard Floyd, who came to Buffalo on a one-year contract this past offseason. We'll dive into him and more on today's show. But let's begin with the unrestricted free agents that the Buffalo Bills will have. Currently, they have 22 unrestricted free agents that they will have. Most notably, it will be Micah Hyde, Daquan Jones, Leonard Floyd, as well as a few other ones as well. But let's begin with Leonard Floyd, who is going to be a free agent after signing a one-year, $7 million contract with the Buffalo Bills this past offseason. I know many like myself did not believe that Leonard Floyd would possibly sign with the Buffalo Bills, but he did. His base salary for the season was $1.165 million. But he did sign a $7 million contract with a few years of void years as well. So the Bills were on the hook for him for just under a salary of $4.376 million this season after the signing bonus as well as the cap hits that he did have. Base salary is different than the signing bonus as well as the cap hit and dead cap hit. So he did have a cap hit overall of $4.376 million of dead cap that he had as well. The Bills were able to get a few incentives into his contract, which was guaranteed. 12 sacks would have guaranteed him another $1 million, which he did not hit. But they did have a few different scenarios where he could have hit that, as well as a few other scenarios where he could have made some more money. He is 31 years old overall. He was a first-round pick by the Chicago Bears in the 2016 NFL Draft. He came out of Georgia as well. He has 7 years of experience in the NFL overall. Career earnings for Leonard Floyd, he has made over $65 million in his career. He previously signed with the Los Angeles Rams, playing for them for a few years, starting in 2020, where he had a $5 million contract that he signed there, as well as a few years where he signed again after winning the Super Bowl, re-signed and was with them for 2 more years, where he had salaries of $16 million and $16.5 million as well. Coming over to the Buffalo Bills on a one-year contract, where he was a big focal point in the Bills this past season, starting off his season with a few sacks begin the year. After the first game, he had a 1.5 sacks along with 5 tackles in the game against the New York Jets to start the year. He was a little quiet in the sack department in the second game of the year, having 0 sacks but 3 tackles. Then going to the Commanders in the third game of the year, he tallied 2 sacks overall. He had 2 sacks against the Jaguars in the London game, along with a forced fumble in that game. Against the Giants, which was week 6, he had another sack. And I won't go into all the sacks that he did have, but he was the Jet killer pretty much throughout his time in Buffalo, where he had 2.5 sacks in the second game of the Jets series. Overall for the year, he did have 32 tackles, 11 assists, 10.5 sacks. And he did some really good things for the Buffalo Bills and provided some reassurance for the Bills with Von Miller being out for a while. And he was one of the biggest reasons that the Bills pass rush was so good this past season. The Bills were able to capitalize with him as well as AJ Epinesa having a career year. Both of them are going to become free agents, and that has a little bit of a tie into possibly Buffalo going after Leonard Floyd this past season. But I want to get into numbers throughout Leonard Floyd's time in the NFL. He started off the 2016 season, his rookie year, with 33 tackles and 7 sacks overall with the Bears in 2017, going down a little bit in the sack department, kept the tackles up, but he had 34 tackles overall, 4.5 sacks. He did have 4 sacks in his third year in the NFL, but 47 tackles throughout his time. He did have an interception that year for 19 yards that was ran back for a touchdown. In 2019, he had 3 sacks, so the sack numbers started to decline throughout his time with the Bears. The Bears did not pick up his 5th-year option, and then he did become he did go to the Rams as well, where he did have a couple of career years with the Rams. When he was with the Rams, he picked up his sack department there, but in 2020, he was released by the Bears, where he did sign a free agent contract for a 1-year deal with the Rams, and he ended up having 10.5 sacks with the Rams in 2020. With the Rams again, where he signed a 2-year contract, he had 9.5 sacks with 70 tackles, and then he also had 9 sacks in his last year with the Rams. He did become an unrestricted free agent at that point when the Bills were in the market for some defensive ends. It was late into the free agency period where the Bills did sign Leonard Floyd to a contract. He was signed very, very late in the free agency period, not signing until June 5th, where he signed a 1-year contract with the Buffalo Bills. After that, the rest is history, where he did have a great year with this team, and he made some really good plays. He was one of the, in my opinion, the player that I noticed the most in the sack department, also using a lot of spin moves as well, which is a couple of things that I really liked about him. In his finesse, all the time, you could see him hustling to the ball, being around the ball quite a bit throughout the season. And I felt like he made other players around him play better to a degree. And I felt like he was a big presence in the Bills defense. Now let's go over to Spotrac, where we can find his salary that he will have for next season. And I do want to get into this real quick, what his market value could be. It is at about $8.1 million. This is based off of a few salaries that were signed around the age of where Leonard Floyd is currently at. These are based off of the salaries of Cam Jordan, who signed a 2-year contract worth $27.9 million when he was 34 years old. Also, a 1-year contract by Brandon Graham for $5 million at the age of 34. Jerry Hughes signed a 2-year contract worth $10 million at age 33, as well as Carlos Dunlap with 1 year, $3 million at age 33. I do feel like this number is a little low based off of his salary. I think that it's going to trend towards maybe the $9 million to $10 million range. So I do feel like this is a little low. And I do want to get into a couple of stats that they do have on here. And this is the important ones, which is the amount of games played for these players in Cam Jordan, Brandon Graham, Jerry Hughes, and Carlos Dunlap that they are comparing with Leonard Floyd in 2022 and 2023. These players in Cam Jordan, Brandon Graham, Jerry Hughes, as well as Carlos Dunlap, all played significantly less snaps than Leonard Floyd did. And that's one of the areas that I do think is going to be a difference. Number one, in games played, Leonard Floyd leads all of them in this stat and played with a change of about 19.82% compared to the other players. He played in every single game for the Buffalo Bills throughout that time. He also averaged more sacks per game than two of the players in Jerry Hughes as well as Carlos Dunlap. He also averaged more tackles per game than 4 of the 5 players on the list. And I do apologize, 3 of the 4 players on the list, because Leonard Floyd is technically in the same category as these players. So 3 out of 4 of the players. Only player he did not average more tackles per game than was Cam Jordan. He averaged 1.53 tackles per game. In his overall games played throughout the year, he was at 17 games played throughout the season, and actually 18 games played if you count the wild card and divisional games. Hurries per game was at 1.62, which is a decrease compared to the other players at 9.5%. 2 players were ahead of him in the hurries per game, which was Cam Jordan as well as Brandon Graham. He was in stops. He was at 1.21 per game, which is less than every player but Jerry Hughes. In the rating department, he was at 17.06% difference than all the other players. He was at 61% compared to all the other players being ahead of him in these categories. I do feel like this is a very low salary for him. I do suspect that he will go for more than that. He is currently ranked as the number 24 defensive end in the free agency department. He will have some significant rivals that he will have in free agency as well. I will get into those free agency players that he will be going up against, which is going to be a few players, but most notably Leonard Floyd being on that list is going to be a big one. I will get into that in just a second. I do apologize. I don't have it up right now, but I will have it up in just a second. But definitely Leonard Floyd is somebody that I believe that the Bills should look at re-signing. I feel like he was a big, significant part of the Bills' offense or defensive unit. He will be going up against Leonard Williams as well as Danielle Hunter, Carl Lawson, Randy Gregory, Jerome Baker as well. These are all edge rushers that he will be going up against. Chase Young is another name that he'll be going up against. Yannick Ngakwe. I'm going to say his name wrong. I apologize. Calais Campbell, who's getting older, but he will be going up against him. Other guys like Brandon Graham, Jerry Hughes are going to be on that list as well. So he will have some competition on that market, which could drive his revenue down a little bit. Now, Leonard Floyd, I do apologize, guys, for that. Leonard Floyd is looking at about a maybe 2-3 year contract, so he's not going to sign a long-term contract based off of his age. So that does play a factor in it. But Leonard Floyd did come out after the season and said that he does not want to take a discount to sign with the Buffalo Bills, and he is going to go wherever the money takes him, which is something that plays a significant role in the Bills wanting to re-sign him. Now, the Bills are about $51 million over the salary cap as it speaks. The Bills are going to have to do some restructuring, signing some players to extensions, possibly even cutting some players, which could be some players that are big names as well. So the Bills are going to have to create some money in order to re-sign players like Leonard Floyd, Micah Hyde, and some other ones that they're going to have to do. They are currently in around the 50 to 60 range, somewhere in that range, as far as players that they do have on their roster for the 2024 season. They can go all the way up to the 90 player mark right now, but they did sign a lot of players to futures slash 2024 signings as well. And one of the biggest names there was KJ Hamler. So the Bills could possibly get some more players on their roster by getting some re-signings in place. The Bills are probably going to have to go into the draft as well as the free agency department and looking for 1-year deals on minimal contracts to be able to get some players to sign. But the Bills are going to have to revamp their defensive line with a lot of players that are going to be out because of their contracts and their contracts not being renewed. So that's going to be one area that Brandon Beane is going to have to do a good job of being able to revamp this defensive line. And I feel like with the presence of a veteran like Leonard Floyd, who can develop guys like AJ Epinesa as well as some younger guys that the Bills might draft, I feel like this is kind of the splash that Brandon Beane's going to have to make to keep some of the continuity at the defensive line position. If you agree with me, let me know in the comments below. I would greatly appreciate it. Now, the Bills are going to have to go after some other guys in free agency as well. They have a ton of players that they're going to have to think about re-signing. But for me, Leonard Floyd is one of those guys that I believe can make a difference for the Buffalo Bills. He has my first re-sign option for the Buffalo Bills this offseason. Don't forget to like, subscribe, follow us on all social media platforms. You can find us on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, and Twitter, as well as on our website, gobillspodcast.com. Click on over to the website where you can find all of our upcoming shows throughout the offseason, and we will have more shows like the Resign and Let Walk throughout the week. Our next show for Resign and Let Walk will be on Friday evening. We will have a good player that we're going to discuss. It will be an offensive player. I do not want to spoil it, but we will have an offensive player on that list. This has been the Go Bills Podcast. We will see you next time for another edition of the Go Bills Podcast and Resign and Let Walk. Until then, Go Bills.